It was past midnight when I heard it. A drumbeat so loud it made my chest thump. But the strange thing was, no one else seemed to hear it. I was visiting my grandmother's village in northern Ghana. It was my first trip back since I was a child, and everything felt different, darker, heavier. People barely smiled. They greeted each other politely but didn't linger. My grandmother said the village had been like this for months. Too many fights, too many grudges, she said. People have forgotten what it means to be one. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air felt too still, and the silence pressed on my ears. I sat on the porch, looking out at the dark trees. The moonlight made the forest look alive, its shadows shifting like they had minds of their own. Then it started. Boom, boom, boom. The sound was deep, like a heartbeat. It wasn't coming from the village drums. I would have seen someone playing. No, this drum was different. It sounded ancient, like it had been there long before any of us. Boom, boom, boom. I stood up, my heart racing. The drumbeat wasn't random. It was calling me. I wanted to wake my grandmother, but something held me back. Instead, I followed the sound. My legs felt like they were moving on their own, carrying me toward the forest. The drumbeats got louder as I walked deeper into the trees. The night felt alive, the air buzzing with something I couldn't name. My fear grew with every step, but I couldn't stop. Finally, I saw it. A fire burned in a clearing ahead. Around it, a circle of people sat in silence, their faces hidden by shadows. They each held a drum, but none of them were playing. Instead, the sound came from the center of the circle, where a single, massive drum sat alone. The drum was ancient, its surface cracked and covered in strange carvings. It pulsed with every beat, almost like it was breathing. Then the drum spoke. "Why have you come?" The voice wasn't human. It was deep and hollow, like it came from the ground beneath me. My knees felt weak, but I managed to whisper, "I don't know." The drum beat louder, and the people around the fire began to chant. Their voices were low, rising and falling like waves. I didn't understand the words, but they sent chills down my spine. My breath caught in my throat. My grandmother had told me about the fights in the village, land disputes, family feuds, stolen cattle. But this felt bigger, like the air itself carried the weight of it all. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You must carry the truth," the drum said, "or the village will fall." The chanting grew louder, and the fire flared up. Shadows danced wildly around me, and the air felt thick, almost suffocating. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. Then, as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The chanting, the fire, the drumbeats, they all vanished. The clearing was empty, as if no one had been there. I stumbled back to my grandmother's house, my heart pounding. When I burst through the door, she was sitting at the table, waiting for me. "You heard it, didn't you?" she said softly. Her words hit me like a slap. "Grandma, what was that? What did it mean?" She sighed, her face heavy with worry. "The talking drum only comes when the village is on the brink of disaster. It forces people to confront the truth, no matter how painful. You've been chosen to speak." The next morning, I gathered the elders and told them everything. At first, they laughed. They said I must have dreamed it. But when I described the carvings on the drum, their faces changed. One by one, they began to confess. Land that had been stolen. Promises that had been broken. Grudges that had festered for years. The more they spoke, the more others came forward. By the end of the day, the village was raw, like an old wound that had been torn open. That night, the elders called a meeting under the big baobab tree. They promised to resolve the disputes and find peace again. I never heard the drum again after that night. But even now, whenever I hear a distant drumbeat, I can't help but wonder. Is it calling someone else? Will they have the courage to listen?